use promo code RADICALLOVE for 10% off a yearly subscription. That's a savings of 20% off the monthly price. Visit thecollective.com. That's TheQuollective, and become part of something that resists, reimagines, and rebuilds.
This is Radical Love Live, an ongoing series of conversations with thought leaders exploring faith outside the boxes, hosted by Mark Dilcomb and Kelly Wilson.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Radical Love Live. This is Kelly. I am flying solo today. Mark is doing some work out of town, but I'm sure that he is freaking awesome as usual. I am here in the studio, and we're having an impromptu interview with our friend Josh Patterson, who you might know as the host of the Rethinking Faith podcast. And we've talked with him before. I always have a great time. We are just kind of following our fascinations as to where we're going. There's so many things going on in the world to comment on, and in our country and in the realm of faith and spirituality, that we're just gonna talk for a while and figure out what afterwards we'll tell you what we talked about. So Josh, welcome. Thank you for jumping on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm excited to be back. It's been a bit. I feel like I've seen you on the social medias, but I feel like I haven't seen you communicated, in a while. So
Right.
it's good to hear your voice again.
Yeah. And it's been a while since we've done a conference or anything. Are you going to be at Beer Camp?
Yes, absolutely.
What are the dates for that this year? Do you remember?
That is a good question. It's still pretty close to the what it was last year, that same week, but it's a day before because of how calendars work. So it's October 16th through the 19th.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. Or it might be 16, 17, and 18. I think it's the 16th through the 18th, rather. 3 days, not 4. Yeah.
All right. So for anybody listening, we're talking about Theology Beer Camp, which is an annual gathering of theologians and beer aficionados and people that are interested in either of those things. We're going to put a little bit of information in the show notes if you're curious to find out more about tickets.
Yeah. There's a I know they're not doing like individual show-based discount codes this year, but there is rather a discount code that has been made available for like $50 off. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I can give it to you to put in the show notes.
All right. Sounds awesome. But that's a great gathering. I know Mark went last year and got to talk with a lot of people, and sounded like a very cool event.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a lot of fun. It's unique. There's nothing quite like Theology Beer Camp, and I know like the name can be kind of kind of daunting, maybe, perhaps, or maybe sound a little bit too bro-y because of the
right
version of beer. But I will have you know the name, Theology Beer Camp, really more so serves as like a tool for self-selection, that like people who might have an issue with the word beer next to the word theology, they might not like the kind of theological conversations that happen at Theology Beer Camp, as it is a more progressive Christian space. And so hopefully, if listeners are put off by the title Theology Beer Camp, I'd encourage you to still go to the website and look at the amazing list of speakers that are going to be there this year, and come hang out. There's also, we do tons of like non-alcoholic beverages as well. There's even an AA group that meets at Theology Beer Camp for people who alcohol is something that they wish to continue avoiding in their life. We don't want the beer thing to be what keeps people away. So everybody, yeah,
it really is more of a signal of like, this is not Grandpa's theology camp.
Right. This isn't.
Unless your grandpa was like an Episcopalian or something. But,
right.
But and also, I believe that it kind of emerged from Tripp Fuller's homebrewed theology, that there's something about it being like yeasty and active and, brewing something that's going to be transformative, that there's a deeper metaphor to it rather than just like, oh, we're just going to sit around and talk theology while we sit at the bar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, oh man, let's see if I can perform Tripp's bit on that well. His whole thing is like, when he started Homebrewed, is that, a lot of religion is kind of like Pabst Blue Ribbon. Like it tastes like chilled piss, and it might have won an award, like 100 years ago. And it still kind of keeps touting that. And that's fine. It was good for what it was, when it was. But now, homebrewed Christianity seeks to, give you the ingredients to brew your own zesty faith, essentially. And so it's more about opening ourselves up to deep conversations, seeking, transformation and hospitality and humility, all those kind of things. So it's a good zesty time, which again is actually, I'm gonna tell you a funny story. I was doing a like a youth conference. I got asked to come speak at this youth conference, and I kept using the word zesty, and the kids were laughing at me. And I didn't quite understand why, because me as a process person, I'm using zesty because that's a word that like has been, popular within the process camp, zest, that, we wanted theology that adds zest to life. But the kids informed me that zesty is another way to refer to call somebody fruity or gay, basically.
Okay. All right.
Apparently, I kept referring to God as zesty, and they thought that was rather funny.
Like, God is fabulous.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's what they thought I was saying. And I'm like, well, I'm not opposed to this reading, but that's not my...
Yeah, queer theology can be part of it. But...
Right. I'm all here for queer theory and queer theology, but that's not what I was trying to communicate at this current point in time.
Right. Was that in a church context or a...
Yeah, oh, very much so. Yeah, it was for a like a regional youth conference that the Disciples of Christ. That's the group that the Disciples of Christ put on. So in North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Yeah, North Carolina is kind of it's an interesting state because there's so much conservative Christianity there, but it seems like there are these like islands of progressive groups as well, like in Raleigh, and I know that there's conferences over in Asheville, and I think Wild Goose is down there.
Yeah, Wild Goose is there. Yeah, I mean it's interesting, and even amongst the students that were present, there was a pretty wide ranging diversity of like where people fall in the theological spectrum. There's any listeners who are a part of Disciples of Christ, and I am butchering your denomination, please forgive me. But this, my understanding is that like they don't have too many doctrines or rules that you have to follow. Their big thing is Eucharist, is the communion table. And their big rule on that is that everybody is welcome. It's an open table. And so then what that affords the opportunity for is there are very, conservative Disciples of Christ churches, and there's also very progressive ones. But what's beautiful about their denomination is they often still seek to come together around the Eucharist. And so you can kind of have some of that kind of depolarizing work going on, even though they disagree very heavily on some things that I think are rather important.
Well, that's great to hear that there are efforts going forward like that. That's one of the things that Mark and I have been talking about a lot lately is, for a couple of years, we were really pushing a kind of a critique of some conservative theological positions and some quote unquote traditional conservative or theological positions that if you go back further in history, you realize that they really weren't traditional until like the 1800s. So there's been a little bit of polemic flavor through some of our episodes. But lately we've been thinking about how do we, I don't know if there's a way to reconcile, but how do we connect with other believers in the body of Christ who have, excuse me, who have very different theological positions, or who are more conservative where we're more progressive, because I
Mhm.
think about that as, as I travel, I'll go to some town and I'll drive around and I'll be like, that's such a beautiful church there on the hill. I would love to go there. And I know that if I went in, that there might be some point during the sermon where I really literally want to stand up and be like, no, it's not like that at all. And if they knew my theological positions, they might want to run me out of town on a rail or lay hands on me and try to heal me. But I'm curious if you've been doing any thinking about that, about how do we connect with other people in the body of Christ?
Uh, yeah, actually I have. And specifically, in the context of like community organizing and these kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
because I think one thing I've noticed, and I might be wrong about this because politics is not a strong suit of mine, but one thing that I have noticed
Mm-hmm.
is that amongst more progressive crowd, there's this kind of ideological purity culture that exists where there's a list of 10 things that we have to believe. And if you don't hit all 10 of them, then you're a Nazi or you're the worst person on the face of the earth or something
Right,
like
right. You
that.
get canceled right out of town.
Yeah. And then we end up, the left ends up eating itself and fighting itself and kicking people out who are all seeking very similar things. And so I think what I've learned within the group of community organizers, that I've been talking to, and I've been reading a whole bunch of books about this, is that um, like if we're actually going to get anything done, part of that requires us to work with people that maybe have shared values but very different beliefs, right?
Mhm.
And like how can we, now that doesn't mean we have to compromise on everything, right? That doesn't mean if you are a queer person that you now have to go work with people who think that queer people should be stoned. That is not what I'm saying. There are still boundaries here that we have to be reasonable about.
Right.
But what I am talking about is trying to come around together around, for example, one group that I really love is this group called Creation Justice Ministries,
Mhm.
and they do a lot of work around like climate change and organizing different congregations and these kind of things. Um, Theologically, they're a lot more conservative than I am,
Mhm.
but our shared value is that we think climate change is a real issue.
Mhm.
Um, and, we can use our faith communities to come around and, combat these issues. And so I think for me, like finding that shared value can be really helpful, or shared goal, maybe. And like,
Mhm.
even, I guess just one more practical thing is that, like, even I have a buddy who loves to send me antagonistic stuff on Instagram. They are
Mhm.
very much to my right politically,
Mhm.
and they love sending me things to try to get me riled up and all this kind of stuff. But when I sit down and actually talk with them and say, okay, dude, explain to me why you think this policy is a good idea, or why, this thing you're so for that seems so, against everything I stand for and believe in. Um, Once I can get at the why and see like, oh, okay, so you value having a safe world for your children. I also value that. I also want a safe world for
Mhm.
children. Um, let's talk about how we can figure that out together. That kind of thing. So, I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of unbaked or half-baked thoughts, but
Oh,
I think
totally,
there's something
totally.
to that.
Yeah, it's hard to do because
Mhm.
we're being trained more and more every day, particularly on social media, to emotionally react quickly to everything and to establish our own orthodoxies. And like what you're talking about, like the left has its kind of own orthodoxy, and it's hard to deviate from any of those things without criticism. And people are so quick to jump on everything. Like the internet ruins everything. Like anything you say, somebody's got like, no, wrong. And it's always like the guy, from junior high school or something. Or you're like, do I really care enough about this guy to fight with him? But can I leave this post on my page without responding to it? Is that an implicit endorsement? And these are all considerations that complicate the idea of, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's think about, like, it's not hard for me to see why conservatives have the positions that they do. And that's the thing, is that people act like, oh, I can't figure out why, they're like, my uncle doesn't care about climate change. Well, because he thinks like Jesus is going to come tomorrow and the whole earth is going to be a cinder and he's going to be flown off to heaven. Like, it's not hard for me to see that. Or he thinks that it's just going to be too economically difficult and not really possible to reverse climate change in our time. So just go with it. And why not just try to pursue our own economic best interests and let God work it out? Or to say like, oh, well, the United States is already way ahead of everybody else. Let's go enforce climate change policy in China because they're polluting like, it's not hard for me to see all that, to be like, you're ridiculous. No, that's not ridiculous. It's just, we're reading different news. We're choosing different sources that fit our confirmation bias, and we have different frameworks that we're looking at the world through. So we can either fight each other, which scientists show tends to have a boomerang effect and make us dig deeper into our trenches, or we can try to find some kind of commonality. And like you said, it's not necessarily going to be common beliefs, but it might be common goals. Like, okay, we want to be able to continue to live a productive life and to work and to make the world better within our ability. Let's start there.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's difficult. It's more like mentally taxing to try to do that. Because like, for example, one thing that people are talking about a lot today is like fascism. Is fascism here in America? And if it is, what do we do about it? And so if that's the case, then like we need to recognize that there are different groups that think very differently from each other, but that need to come together for the common value of, we don't want fascism. So you're people who are more traditionally democratic in the sense that they belong to like the Democrat Party. They might need to start working with people who fit more of the like socialist Marxist type group. And maybe some of those who fall more into like the anarchy type style of preference, And so those three groups are very, very different. However, all three of them working together can combat the same thing that they all want to avoid, which is fascism. And so it's hard, but I think if we're mature and we can kind of try to come together and do it, then, for a common goal, maybe it's feasible. Or maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know.
Well, I hope you're not. I hope that is feasible, because if the left doesn't organize, then it's just going to splinter off into different factions, and you'll have people being like, no, even the Democrats are too conservative for us. They're part of the same war machine, etc. The Collective isn't just another media platform. It's a justice-fueled toolbox for people who want to change the world and still laugh while doing it. You'll get access to powerful essays, brilliant satire, and original articles that speak truth to power. But it doesn't stop there. We've also got resources for writing your representatives, directories of Black and queer-owned businesses to support, and community-focused tools to help you turn conviction into action. Use promo code RADICALLOVE for 10% off a yearly subscription. That's a savings of 20% off the monthly price. Go to thecollective.com and let's build a post-fascist future together. And it's funny, like if you look at the right, particularly over the last few decades, that they don't, for all of their preaching about morality, they don't seem to have a problem with making some strange ideological bedfellows, and you've got conservative Christians aligning themselves with self-serving tech billionaires without stopping to be like, didn't Jesus say something about wealthy people and, helping the poor and how the nations will be judged by their charity? And these guys are amassing wealth and exploiting workers. And they don't seem to have a problem aligning across ideological lines to achieve common goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's part of the, like when I said like the ideological purity culture bit, that's part of the thing I see that doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of conservative spaces, is they are willing to set aside some things if there's a common goal that they all want to kind of get after.
Yeah.
Which I think, yeah, we can critique them for that, but it also can be seen as a strength, right? I mean, there's a lot of moral compromises that I would not be willing to make, but
Right.
we can see the effectiveness of it and can imagine a world in which it's done in a way that's more morally appropriate. But
yeah. Well, and I feel like I'm making a moral compromise every time I make a vote for somebody. It's always just
absolutely.
like I don't 100% agree with the platform of the parties that I usually vote for. They're too big. They're too expansive. I kind of wish there were multiple parties that had a little more nuance to them, because it's either all of one thing or all of another, and we kind of get pushed into these boxes.
Yeah.
And and it echoes out into our lives, like the fact that I've got a Subaru parked outside that's got like a rainbow peace sign sticker in the back window. Like everybody kind of knows which way I'm going when I hit the voting booth. As I pass the Ford F-150 on the Garden State Parkway that's got like the black and white upside down American flag on the back of it, like, we know.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, since you bring that up, I think it's interesting how we, like specifically in this country now, we've gotten to a point where our consumer choices are indicators of our political leanings.
Yeah, like you go to Walmart or Target.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's so interesting to me. Or like I drive a Subaru. So I don't know. I just, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny to me. Or even locally here in Maryland. So as you probably remember, I used to be a brewer. And one thing I love about the Maryland beer scene is that all the different breweries really come together and support one another, and the beer community in Maryland is really cool. But even within these various breweries, if you like, there are certain spaces that if this person spends a lot of time at this brewery, they're definitely more progressive, or if they're spending more time at this brewery, they're definitely more conservative. And it's funny because it's all just beer. But even something as silly as that is like, can serve as like, a barrier between different, I don't know, voting bases or something. It seems wild.
Like I'm over here drinking the Don't Tread on Me IPA versus the, the Love is Love IPA.
Right. Who probably all source their hops and ingredients from the same company. And
right.
Yeah. Their yeast came from the same lab. Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, we've had that discussion a little bit lately about Chick-fil-A. That every once in a while, I have a teenager, she's 16 and wants to eat all the time. Sometimes it's like, boy, I really would like a Chick-fil-A. And then we have a whole conversation, like the progressive parents about, Chick-fil-A has a history of donating to these foundations that are fighting against queer rights. And every time we do break down and get a Chick-fil-A meal, we do write a check to the Trevor Foundation in the same amount that we spend to like carbon offset. It's like, prejudice offset. But what it doesn't recognize is that Chick-fil-A has actually changed a lot of its donation patterns over the last 10 years based on consumer pressure. And are we giving other companies that scrutiny? Like, do and we've done this. We actually looked at the political donations of, say, Home Depot and Lowe's, figure out which one are we going to go to, or, any number of different brands. Like you said, the consumer choices are indicating our political leanings, but looking at who they're donating to is interesting. But I don't know that we give that scrutiny to everybody. But Chick-fil-A got pushed out front as a newsworthy, I don't know, whipping post or something.
Yeah, that actually, I'll tell you a funny story about the Chick-fil-A thing. So last year when Theology Beer Camp was in Denver, one of the people that was there is my friend, Dr. Taylor Thomas. They do the Till It Today podcast, which is wonderful. But anyway, I walked into like one of the side rooms and Taylor was in there eating Chick-fil-A with like 2 or 3 of my other friends. And I was like, wow, Taylor, you hate gay people or something? Like, just said it as kind of a passing comment, or like asked the group if they must hate gay people. And then Christy, my friend, was like, no, Taylor said it's okay. Taylor's queer. And so it was just kind of like this funny joke. And then Taylor was telling me later, like, yeah, like Tripp asked me to lead they do like these breakouts for lunch where you can eat. One day it might be organized by like where you live geographically. One day it might be like people who, LGBTQ folks or people who identify as atheists or whatever. So like break up in that way. And Taylor was asked to lead the LGBTQ group. And they started the group meeting and then left early so they could go get more Chick-fil-A. And Taylor was like, I'm the worst queer person in the world. They're going to revoke my queer card. But I don't know. That story made me laugh.
It does remind me of, to tie this back to scripture, of, when everybody was looking at Peter being like, hey, what are you doing? Like eating barbecue with those Gentiles over there. Like you can't be doing that. The purity culture and trying to enforce, different cultural rules as right or wrong. But anyway, we just kind of muddle through. I'm sure that most of the businesses that I work with, unless it's like some really controlled, independent little mom and pop business, there's some kind of compromise behind it. I remember a few years ago, Jonathan Merritt wrote an article about Chick-fil-A and he was talking specifically about New York. Have you talked with, say, like the guy at the local halal cart about his political views and his views about sexuality? Like they're probably not as flexible as, some of the folks at Chick-fil-A, but you don't really question it. You go and you get your shawarma and then you go on. Which is calling out that, there are certain things that become these cultural touch points, and then certain things we just kind of let go by the wayside.
Yeah, to the point where like where I start to get frustrated is when things just become like performative, with no real substance, because then what it does is it allows us to feel morally superior to others without actually contributing to changing the things that we want to see changed. And I'm saying that about myself, right? Like, I think it's like if we actually sat down and tried to figure out all the ways that we are complicit in systems that go against our morals, we would be screwed. Like we would not be able to function in the world. Like we'd have to, like become a hermit. And still, I did an episode with Tad DeLay recently, and he was talking about like, even if I were to become a person experiencing homelessness today and got rid of all of my things, I still would be leaving a carbon footprint as an American that's greater than, in some other places. So there's just no way to really escape the system that we live in, which sucks. It's, it's the ocean we swim in, so we have to learn how to swim. But also, how can we, I don't know, maybe this metaphor doesn't work, but how can we learn to filter the water we're swimming through or something like that, right? I don't know. It's messy, and it can be really, it can freeze us, if we think about it too much, which we should think about it. We should be conscious of where we're spending our money and who we're supporting. But I don't know. I just get really bummed out when I realize all the ways I'm complicit in systems that suck.
Oh, totally, totally. And I am too. This is one of the confessions that I made while we were chatting before we started recording today, is that much of my living in advertising I've made working in healthcare, where, and when I first started, I was like 25 and got into it, and I was like, oh, I'm helping sick people and I'm helping educate physicians about new medications. And that's really great. It's helping people along. And the longer I'm in the industry and I'm in meetings where people are talking behind the scenes about how to set prices for medications, or, what happens when you have a medication that's not as good as the other one, but you try to sell it anyway. And, some morally compromising issues, and how the insurance industry has influenced drug prices behind the scenes for years without exposing medications to market pressure. So the prices went up and people didn't even realize it until just, like a few years ago, there was a kind of a revelation about how much drugs really cost, particularly when insurance started getting more and more divorced from employment. So people were like, oh, I got to pay for this myself. Why is it $10,000? What's going on? And then, the rationale behind that is, it costs billions of dollars to test all these drugs, and only like 1 in 10 drugs actually makes it through. So they got to recoup their profits. But how much of that goes to marketing? Quite a bit. And you can make the argument of like, well, the marketers are the only ones that are really educating doctors about new drugs. But, everybody's just a little greedier than they should be at every step of the way. And as somebody who's made his living that way, I'm like, well, it's been a great way to feed my family. Like, we really needed this. And it does occasionally help some people, but I know, I know. And thankfully I'm now, like I said, I'm far enough along in this industry that I'm able to choose my clients a little bit more carefully. And there are some clients that are, trying to get away from purely medication-based therapy, trying to fight opioid addiction. I try to make it a little bit more altruistic, but I have to think about that sometimes. Like, think about what my contribution was to this, to this industry, that it's made a profit off of healthcare, and it's not simple, because there's an argument that if it was completely non-profit based, that it would be, that you wouldn't see as much innovation. But then there are others who argue we don't need as much innovation. Do we need a new antidepressant every couple of years? Maybe the old ones work. Maybe talk therapy works. It's, anyway, I'm rambling here a little bit, but I'm just confessing my heart that I know that I too am complicit in some of those systems, and that for a lot of us, when you have to work, and sometimes you got to hitch yourself to a train that's, got some contraband in car number 3. I don't know if that metaphor works, but yeah.
I think it works. I get it. And I don't know. I appreciate the honesty though. I think it is, I don't know. It's a real struggle. And I think even just being able to acknowledge it sets us up in a place to, it's better than not acknowledging it.
Right. Or, or a few years ago, I remember I had a friend of mine who's an Episcopal minister who called me out on it. We were talking about it online again. That was, we were arguing about the drug industry, and I was really making the case of, pharmaceutical companies are educating physicians and nobody else is innovating. And he was like, holy shit, you drank the Kool-Aid. Like, I thought you were just doing this because it was a good job, but you're really into it. And I had to really think about it. Like, did I swallow the wrong pill? So that opened my eyes to, how how much I had written myself a certain narrative, and that I needed to look at it from another perspective to get a better sense of my place in the bigger picture. We are just about at time, so Josh, thank you for going on this journey as we talk about our divided society and how many things it touches and how we navigate these systems. I look forward to continuing this conversation next week, but thank you for taking the time today. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you. I hope something that I said made sense. Like, I said politics makes me very uncomfortable. I'd much rather talk about abstract theological ideas, but
And yeah, I keep dragging you back in, just like
here we are.
The Godfather. Like I try to get away, they keep pulling me back. All right, well, thanks, and everybody, stay tuned for a continuation of this conversation next week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Radical Love Live, hosted by Mark Dilcom and Kelly Wilson. Recorded at the Bravery Studios in Garfield, New Jersey. All rights reserved. Find our episodes on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And check us out at radicallovelive.com, along with our personal websites at markdilcom.com and kellywilson.com. This is Radical Love Live, where we explore faith outside the boxes.
If your idea of self-care is dunking on fascism and reading spicy takedowns of theocracy over coffee, welcome to The Collective. It's like if James Baldwin, Bell Hooks, and The Onion had a love child and raised it on banned books and street protests. We've got savage satire, essays that slap, and articles that punch up, not down. Plus, tools to email your reps, scripts for calling your city council, and a badass directory of Black and queer-owned businesses you should have been supporting yesterday. Use code RADICALLOVE for 10% off a yearly plan and help build the post-fascist, pro-people media ecosystem we actually need. TheCollective.com. Let's raise hell and make it useful.